The mockery Maya Chen smoothed her second-hand blazer one final time before stepping onto the gleaming stage of the National Education Innovation Summit. The auditorium buzzed with conversations between corporate executives, university presidents, and education technology moguls, people whose annual budgets exceeded her entire community's combined income. She clutched her worn leather folder containing months of research and hope printed on recycled paper. Next, we have Maya Chen from Riverside Valley. Presenting the Community-Based Literacy Acceleration Program, announced the moderator, barely. Glancing up from his tablet, Maya approached the microphone, her heart hammering against her ribs. Beyond the blinding stage lights, she could make out hundreds of faces, some curious, others already checking their phones. In the front row sat the panel of judges, including Alexander Kane, the 34-year-old founder of EduTech Solutions, whose company had revolutionized online learning platforms worldwide. "Good afternoon," Maya began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Maya Chen, and I teach at Riverside Elementary, where 60% of our students read below grade level due to limited resources and language barriers," she clicked. To her first slide, a photo of her modest classroom filled with eager young faces. Traditional literacy programs often fail in communities like ours because they don't account for cultural context or family circumstances. Children whose parents work multiple jobs need flexible, community-integrated learning that extends beyond school hours. Maya's presentation unfolded like a carefully woven tapestry. She explained how local seniors could mentor struggling readers, how teenagers could earn community service credits by tutoring younger children, and how mobile learning stations could reach families in remote areas. Her slides showed hand-drawn charts and photographs of children reading under trees, families gathering for evening story circles, and teenagers proudly displaying their reading certificates. The program costs less than $3,000 to implement, Maya concluded, but creates a sustainable network that transforms entire communities. When we teach one child to read, we're actually reaching 3 generations: the child, their siblings, and often their parents who learn alongside them. The audience offered polite applause, but Maya noticed several panel members exchanging glances. Alexander Kane leaned forward, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you, Miss Chen," said the moderator. "Panel, your questions?" Alexander's hand shot up immediately. "I have to ask," he said, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium's sound system. "Don't you think this is a bit quaint? I mean, reading circles under trees? Senior citizen tutors? This sounds like something from a nostalgic movie, not a scalable education solution." Heat rushed to Maya's cheeks, but she kept her voice level. "Respect, Mr. Kane, not every solution requires expensive technology. Sometimes the most effective innovations use existing community resources in new ways." Alexander chuckled, and several audience members joined in. "Look, I admire your enthusiasm. I really do. But let's be realistic here. We're in 2024. It's not 1924. Successful education programs need data analytics, personalized learning algorithms, measurable outcomes. What you're describing is basically a book club with good intentions." Maya felt the weight of every eye in the auditorium. The other presenters had showcased sleek apps, AI-powered tutoring systems, and virtual reality classrooms. Her handmade charts and community photos suddenly seemed painfully amateur. Furthermore, Alexander continued, warming to his theme, "how do you scale something like this? How do you maintain quality control when your teachers are untrained? Volunteers? Where's your business model? Your sustainability plan beyond feel-good community spirit?" The questions hit like physical blows. Maya's carefully prepared responses seemed to evaporate under the bright lights and scrutinizing stares. She managed to stammer something about pilot programs and community partnerships. But Alexander had already moved on, shaking his head with an expression that clearly communicated his verdict to the entire room. "Next presenter," called the moderator, barely giving Maya time to gather her materials as she walked off stage. Maya heard whispered comments floating from the audience. "Sweet but unrealistic. Needs to understand scalability. Nice heart. Wrong venue." She slipped out through a side door, her face burning with humiliation, but her resolve quietly hardening like steel in a forge. The Quiet Revolution 3 months after the conference. Watching volunteers arrive with folding tables and cardboard boxes full of donated books, the humiliation from the summit had transformed into something much more powerful: determination mixed with strategic thinking. If Alexander Kane wanted measurable outcomes and sustainability plans, she would give him both. "Morning, Maya," called out Alina Rodriguez, a retired librarian who had become Maya's most reliable partner. "The teenagers from the high school should be here by 7, and Mrs. Patterson is bringing homemade cookies again." Maya smiled, checking her clipboard. The past months had been a whirlwind of door-to-door conversations, late-night planning sessions, and small victories that felt enormous. After the conference, she had returned to Riverside Valley, not defeated, but energized. She spent her evenings walking through the neighborhood, talking to parents, grandparents, and teenagers about what they wanted for their community's children. The response had surprised everyone, including Maya herself. Mr. Kim from the corner market offered his back room for weekend tutoring sessions. Teenage soccer players volunteered to read with younger kids in exchange for community service hours they needed for graduation. 8 senior citizens who had been feeling forgotten suddenly found purpose in sharing their stories and wisdom with eager young listeners. "Okay, everyone," Maya announced as more volunteers gathered. "Today marks the official launch of our 3-month pilot program. We have 42 children signed up, ranging from ages 5 to 15. Each child gets paired with both a teenage mentor and a senior reading buddy." She pulled out her phone, showing the simple app she had built using free online tools. "I know it's not fancy, but we can track each child's progress, log volunteer hours, and measure improvement over time. Alina helped me design reading assessments that account for our bilingual families." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a retired teacher who had driven 30 minutes from the next town to volunteer, raised her hand. "What about the parents who feel intimidated by formal education settings? That's why we're meeting here instead of at the school," Maya explained. "And every session includes family story time where parents can participate at whatever level feels comfortable. Some just listen, others share stories from their own cultures. The goal is making literacy feel like a community celebration, not a remedial program." As the first families began arriving, Maya felt her heart swell with quiet pride. 8-year-old Carlos bounded through the door, pulling his grandmother behind him. "Abuela, this is where I'm going to learn to read chapter books," he announced. His grandmother, who spoke limited English, smiled shyly until Alina greeted her warmly in Spanish and guided her to the family area. The morning unfolded exactly as Maya had envisioned months ago on that humiliating conference stage. Under the community center's fluorescent lights, not nearly as romantic as reading under trees, but practical for morning sessions, teenagers sat cross-legged on carpet squares, patiently sounding out words with younger children. Senior citizens settled into comfortable chairs, their voices gentle and encouraging as they shared picture books with beginning readers. Maya moved between groups, taking notes and photos. This wasn't just a feel-good community project anymore. It was becoming a documented, measurable program that could indeed be replicated. She learned to speak Alexander Kane's language of data and outcomes while staying true to her belief in human connection. Miss Maya called out Sophia, a high school junior who volunteered every Saturday. Little Anna just read her first complete sentence without help. Maya hurried over to witness Anna, a shy 6-year-old whose parents worked double shifts at the local factory. Proudly reading aloud, the cat sat on the mat. It was simple, but the joy on Anna's face was profound. Her teenage mentor high-fived her while her senior reading buddy, Mr. Thompson, wiped away a tear. By noon, the community center buzzed with excited chatter in both English and Spanish. Parents lingered after the session, discussing their children's progress and volunteering to help with next week's activities. Maya watched the scene with growing confidence. This was working not despite its simplicity, but because of it. That evening, Maya sat at her kitchen table, updating her progress spreadsheet and uploading photos to the program's social media page. Her documentation was becoming more sophisticated each week, partly out of genuine interest in tracking effectiveness, but also because Alexander Kane's dismissive words still echoed in her mind. She would prove that community-based solutions could be both heartwarming and rigorous, both scalable and personal. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The program's Facebook page had gained 50 new followers in one day, and a local news station had messaged about doing a feature story. Maya smiled, remembering her grandmother's saying, "Still waters run deep." Her quiet revolution was beginning to create ripples far beyond Riverside Valley. The unexpected recognition 18 months after the conference disaster. Alexander Kane sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, scrolling through education sector reports with growing frustration. EDU Tech Solutions had just posted another quarter of record profits, but something felt hollow about the achievement. His algorithms could personalize learning for millions of students, yet teacher satisfaction surveys showed declining morale and dropout rates in underserved communities remained stubbornly high. "Sir?" His assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway holding a tablet. "The quarterly impact assessment you requested is ready, and there's something unusual in the community engagement section you might want to see." Alexander gestured for her to continue, not looking up from his laptop screen where he was reviewing acquisition targets for the next fiscal year. "There's a small literacy program in California that's showing remarkable results," Jennifer said, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. "They're achieving better reading improvement rates than some of our pilot programs, but they're using almost no technology." The data analyst flagged it because their cost per student outcome is incredibly low. Now Alexander looked up. How low? Roughly $18 per student for measurable improvement, compared to our average of $430 per student. Jennifer pulled up charts on her tablet. The program is called Community Voices Literacy Initiative, run by someone named Maya Chen. Alexander's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. Maya Chen. The name hit him like a physical force, bringing back vivid memories of that earnest young teacher with her handmade charts and passionate speech about reading circles under trees, the woman he had publicly dismissed as naive and unrealistic. "Show me the data," he said quietly. Jennifer approached his desk, spreading the tablet screen wider. "Look at this. They started with 42 students in one community center. Now they're in 7 locations across 3 counties, serving over 300 families. Their reading level improvements are consistently above state averages, and they have a 96% retention rate." Alexander studied the graphs with growing amazement. The program had evolved far beyond what Maya had presented at the conference. She had developed standardized assessment tools, created training protocols for volunteers, and established partnerships with local schools and libraries. Most impressively, she had documented everything with the kind of rigorous data collection that would satisfy even his most demanding investors. "There's more," Jennifer continued. 3 universities have reached out to study their model, and the state education department is considering it for wider implementation. The local news coverage has been overwhelmingly positive, and they just received a $50,000 grant from the Morrison Foundation. Alexander leaned back in his chair, remembering his dismissive words from 18 months ago. "Book club with good intentions," he had called it. The memory made him wince. "Has anyone from our company been in contact with this program?" he asked. "Not officially, but some of our field researchers have mentioned it in their reports. They're particularly interested in how the program maintains quality control with volunteer educators and how they've managed to scale without losing community connection." Alexander stood and walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the sprawling tech campus below. His employees drove luxury cars and worked in state-of-the-art facilities, developing cutting-edge educational software that served millions. But Maya Chen, working out of community centers with donated books and volunteer grandparents, was achieving results that matched or exceeded his company's most successful programs. "Jennifer, I want you to compile everything we have on this Community Voices program. Every report, every data point, every mention in our research files." "Certainly, sir. You considering an acquisition or partnership?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment, watching employees walk across the courtyard below. "I'm considering an apology," he said finally. That evening, Alexander found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, researching a small community program with genuine personal interest rather than business strategy. He discovered Maya's program had been featured in Education Weekly, with quotes from parents, children, and volunteers describing how the initiative had transformed not just reading skills, but entire family dynamics. One quote particularly struck him. "Miss Chen showed us that every person in our community has something valuable to teach," said Alina Rodriguez, described as a volunteer coordinator and retired librarian. She took what others saw as limitations, language barriers, economic challenges, age differences, and turned them into our greatest strengths. Alexander closed his laptop and stared at his reflection in the dark window. When was the last time someone had described his work as transformative, beyond profit margins and user engagement metrics? His programs reached more people and generated more revenue. But Maya's work seemed to create something he had forgotten was possible. Genuine human connection through shared learning. He pulled out his phone and began typing an email to his travel coordinator. It was time to see for himself what the woman he had dismissed as a naive dreamer had actually built. But first, he had some serious thinking to do about what he would say when he met Maya Chen again. The drive to Riverside Valley would take 3 hours from his office. Alexander realized he had no idea what he would find there, or whether Maya would even agree to see him. But for the first time in months, he felt genuinely curious about something beyond market share and quarterly projections. Maya Chen had proven him wrong in the most thorough way possible by succeeding on her own terms. The slow, understanding Alexander's silver Tesla looked absurdly out of place in the gravel parking lot of Riverside Community Center. Sat for several minutes, watching through the windows as children and teenagers moved purposefully between activity stations while adults chatted in small groups. The scene buzzed with quiet energy that felt entirely different from the structured chaos of his corporate offices. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out of the car and walked toward the entrance. Through the glass doors, he could see Maya moving between groups of children, her attention fully focused on a young boy who was proudly showing her a drawing of what appeared to be a family reading together. When Maya looked up and saw him standing awkwardly in the doorway, her expression shifted from surprise to wariness. She excused herself from the children and approached him with measured steps. "Mr. Kane," she said simply, her voice neither warm nor hostile. "This is unexpected." "Miss Chen," Alexander corrected himself, suddenly feeling like an intruder. "I was hoping we could talk about your program, about what I said at the conference." Maya studied his face for a moment. Around them, the learning sessions continued. With barely a pause, but Alexander noticed several volunteers glancing their way with protective curiosity. Alina Maya called to the silver-haired woman organizing books nearby. "Could you take over the reading assessment station? I'll be back in a few minutes." She led Alexander to a quiet corner where mismatched chairs surrounded a low table covered with children's artwork. "You drove 3 hours to see a book club with good intentions?" Maya asked, settling into her chair with the confident ease of someone completely in her element. Alexander winced. "I deserve that. I came to apologize, actually, and to understand. What you've built here, what I've built," Maya repeated, gesturing around the bustling room, "is exactly what I presented 18 months ago. The only difference is now I have data to prove it works." "The data is impressive," Alexander admitted. $18 per student outcome, 96% retention, reading improvements that exceed state averages. Your model is more cost-effective than most of our programs." Maya's eyebrows rose slightly. "You've been tracking our program? My research team flagged it in our quarterly impact assessment. When I saw your name..." Alexander paused, searching for the right words. "I realized I might have been wrong about some things." Before Maya could respond, a teenager approached their table hesitantly. "Ms. Chen? Sorry to interrupt, but Carlos is having trouble with the comprehension questions, and his reading buddy had to leave early." "Of course, Sophia. Mr. Kane, would you excuse me for a moment?" Alexander watched as Maya knelt beside a boy of about 10, speaking to him in gentle Spanish before switching to English. "Remember what we practiced about context clues," she said, pointing to words in the story. "What do you think is happening here, based on the picture and the words you do recognize?" The boy's face lit up with understanding, and he began working through the passage with renewed confidence. Maya caught Alexander watching, and gestured for him to join them. "Carlos, this is Mr. Kane. He creates computer programs that help children learn to read." Carlos looked up with interest. "Like video games?" "Sometimes," Alexander said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "What kind of games do you like?" For the next hour, Alexander found himself drawn into the rhythm of the program. He helped Sophia organize reading materials, listened as Mr. Thompson, an 8-year-old retired mechanic, patiently coached a shy girl through a challenging paragraph, and watched teenagers earn community service credits while genuinely bonding. With younger children, what struck him most was the complete absence of the anxiety often observed in traditional tutoring programs. Children moved freely between activities, parents chatted comfortably in both English and Spanish, and learning seemed to emerge naturally from social interaction rather than formal instruction. "The secret," Maya explained as they walked between stations, "is that everyone here is both a teacher and a student." Carlos struggles with reading, but he's teaching Mr. Thompson basic Spanish phrases. Sophia earns service hours, but she's also learning patience and communication skills. The parents who feel intimidated by formal education settings become storytellers and cultural experts. Alexander nodded, beginning to understand why traditional metrics had failed to capture the program's impact. "You're not just teaching reading skills, you're building social capital." "Exactly. And social capital is what makes the learning sustainable long after children leave our program." As the afternoon session wound down, Alexander found himself helping stack chairs and organize supplies alongside teenagers and grandparents. The physical work felt oddly satisfying after months of abstract strategizing in conference rooms. Mr. Kane Alina approached as he folded the last table. "Maya, mentioned you work in educational technology. We've been discussing how to reach families who can't come to our physical locations. Do you have any thoughts on simple video conferencing tools that wouldn't require expensive equipment?" Alexander looked at Maya, who nodded encouragingly. "Actually, yes. There are some platforms designed specifically for low-bandwidth areas." He found himself sketching out technical solutions while Alina took notes, his corporate expertise finally feeling genuinely useful. Later, as volunteers said their goodbyes and children hugged their reading buddies, Maya and Alexander stood in the parking lot beside his incongruous Tesla. "I owe you more than an apology," Alexander said. "I dismissed something I didn't understand, and I was wrong to mock your vision publicly." Maya was quiet for a moment, watching the last families drive away. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted, "but your criticism forced me to think more strategically about documentation and scalability. In some ways, you helped make this program stronger. Still, what I said was arrogant and dismissive. You deserved better." "Yes, I did." Maya's directness surprised him, but her tone wasn't harsh. "The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" Alexander looked back at the community center, then at Maya's expectant face. "I'd like to help if you'll let me, not with money or acquisition offers, but with the technical infrastructure you need to scale." Elena's question about video conferencing? That's something I could actually contribute to. Maya studied him carefully. "You'd volunteer? Here, if you'll have me. I think I have a lot to learn about what education really means." For the first time since he'd arrived, Maya smiled genuinely. Saturday mornings, 9 to 12, were clothes you don't mind getting dusty. Prepare to be challenged by some very smart children who won't be impressed by your net worth. As Alexander drove home through the darkening valley, he realized something fundamental had shifted. For years, he had measured success through market dominance and profit margins. But watching Carlos sound out words with growing confidence, seeing Sophia's pride in her mentoring skills, and witnessing the quiet transformation of families through shared learning had reminded him why he had entered education technology in the first place: to make a difference in individual lives. The promise fulfilled 2 years later. Alexander stood nervously backstage at the Riverside Community Center, now expanded into a gleaming facility that somehow managed to feel both modern and warmly welcoming. Through the curtains, he could hear the excited chatter of families gathering for the grand opening of Maya's 10th Learning Center. You ready for this? Maya appeared beside him, radiant in a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Her confidence had grown alongside her program's success. But she still moved with the same purposeful grace he remembered from that first day in the parking lot. "Should be asking you that question," Alexander said, straightening his tie. "It is your moment." Maya smiled, reaching up to adjust his collar with familiar ease. Their partnership had evolved slowly over months of Saturday mornings spent organizing books and troubleshooting tablets, evening phone calls about expansion strategies, and quiet dinners where they discovered they shared the same dreams for education's future, just from different starting points. "Our moment," she corrected. "I couldn't have reached 10 communities without your infrastructure support." The ceremony was everything Maya had envisioned. Children from all 10 centers performing a multilingual poetry presentation. Teenagers showcasing digital storytelling projects, and grandparents beaming with pride as they received volunteer appreciation awards. Alexander had helped design the streaming technology that connected all 10 locations. But the heart of the celebration was purely Maya's vision come to life. "Before we conclude," Maya announced from the podium, "I have something personal to share." She gestured for Alexander to join her on stage. He walked out to scattered applause, still amazed that these communities had accepted him not as a wealthy donor, but as someone willing to learn and contribute. 3 years ago," Maya continued, "someone publicly told me my dreams were naive and unrealistic. He wasn't entirely wrong. I was naive about data collection, scalability, and sustainable funding models." Alexander felt his cheeks warm as hundreds of faces turned toward him. But Maya's voice grew stronger. He was completely wrong about the power of community, the wisdom of ordinary people, and the possibility that simple solutions can create extraordinary change. "Alexander Kane taught me to dream bigger by teaching me to plan better." She turned to face him directly. "Alex, you've spent 2 years proving that critics can become collaborators, that wealth can serve communities rather than command them, and that some of the best teachers are willing to become students." Alexander's throat tightened as Maya pulled a small velvet box from her pocket. "So I'm asking you," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room, "will you marry me?" The auditorium erupted in cheers and applause as Alexander stared at Maya in shock. Leave it to her to completely upend expectations even in this moment. "Maya Chen," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you never stop surprising me." "Of course, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her amid thunderous celebration, Alexander realized this was exactly right. Maya had always been the one with vision and courage. It was fitting that she would be the one to propose marriage, just as she had been the one to propose solutions that changed everything. 6 months later, they were married in the original Riverside Community Center, surrounded by children, teenagers, parents, and grandparents from all 10 learning communities. Maya walked down an aisle lined with books donated by families who had been touched by her program. Wearing a dress sewn by the teenage fashion design club she had started the year before, as they exchanged vows, Alexander looked out at faces, representing dozens of languages, cultures, and generations, united by shared commitment to learning and growth. Carlos, now reading at grade level, served as ring bearer. Sophia, heading to college on a scholarship partially funded by Alexander's foundation, read a poem she had written about second chances and unexpected friendships. "I promise," Alexander said, taking Maya's hands, "to keep learning from you too. Keep questioning my assumptions, and to remember that the most important technology is human connection." Maya's response was characteristically direct. "I promise to keep dreaming impossible dreams and making you help me turn them into reality." They kissed as their community erupted in celebration, and Alexander marveled at the journey that had brought them here. He had mocked her dreams, and she had proven him magnificently wrong. It's not through arguments or confrontation, but by quietly building something. It's beautiful and sustainable and real. As they danced their first dance to music played by the community. "Center's intergenerational band," Alexander whispered in Maya's ear. "What's the next impossible dream?" Maya grinned, her eyes already sparkling with new possibilities. "How do you feel about expanding internationally?" Alexander laughed, spinning her around the dance floor surrounded by their extended family of learners and teachers and dreamers. Some things never changed. Maya Chen would always be 3 steps ahead, and he would always be grateful to follow where she led.